Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Ever Forward Mindset podcast. I'm your host and its founder, Michael Rebello. I'm a 20-year-old entrepreneur who chose entrepreneurship over the traditional college path, inspired and driven by my goal to retire my mother and help other middle Americans like her learn about and invest in different asset classes like multifamily real estate to achieve long-lasting financial freedom. This past February, she was able to step away from her W-2 corporate job to become a full-time entrepreneur with me. And now we're working on the financial freedom side. So that's awesome. But there's a lot of people out there like my mom who don't understand that, there's people like us that can actually get into these asset classes and invest. And sometimes we go, well, don't the banks do that? Doesn't BlackRock do that and everything? Well, actually, no, that's not true. And there's a particular guest that we're having on today that's actually basically the perfect spitting image of that, Paul Montelongo. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming on to the show, my friend. How are you today?
I'm so good right now. I'm great. Thanks for having
Awesome.
me. Good.
Yeah, of course. So I've known Paul for a little bit now. Goodness, it's probably been about 2 years since I've seen your face on Zoom calls and on sponsorship roundtables and all the deals that you've been working on. So I'm like, I have to get this guy on the podcast. He's got a ton of value. So Paul, before I steal your thunder, I don't want to do that. How did you get into real estate? What were you in before, and what piqued your interest with real estate investing in general? Like, what happened? What was that shift for you?
Yeah. So I bought my first deal. I did my first deal when I was 17 years old. So my father, who did not own any real estate other than the house that we grew up in, and I don't even think he owned that until I was maybe 14 or 15 years old, he would tell me, you want to do anything, go buy real estate, go invest in real estate and buy real estate. And I took him at his word. So in the summers I would work, I would do the odd jobs that we all did. And I saved my money and I bought this little cul-de-sac pie-shaped lot in San Antonio. And it cost me $7,500. And so I had scratched up $7,500 and I put it on that piece of land. I thought I was going to build a house, a spec house, and I thought I was going to sell it for hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I had no clue of how to build a house, how to sell it. And so I let it sit there. And then 2 years later, I put a sign on a telephone pole that said, lot for sale. And I had my parents' telephone number at their house, the phone on the wall.
Yep.
You don't get that. You don't get that. But there used to be phones on the wall. And someone called and said, yeah, let me see what you have. So I sold the property. Now I made $7,500 on it. I bought it for 75. I sold it for 15,000. And so I'm 19 years old. I have $7,500. It's a windfall profit. And I do the thing that every real estate investor is supposed to do with a windfall profit. And that is what?
Oh, I know this too. I actually haven't heard of a windfall. I've heard of a waterfall, but not a windfall.
No, I went and bought a truck and a motorcycle.
Hey,
you're supposed to reinvest it, my friend. You're supposed to reinvest it. You make a windfall profit, you reinvest it. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that, of course. And I was attending community college and I was studying architectural design. And the professor said, when you graduate and get your degree, you will be able to make $40,000 a year. And I heard that. I went home, I thought about it, and I did not return to school the next day. And I did not get a college education. I'm self-taught. But then 2 years later, I bought another house and I flipped it. I bought the house across the street. I flipped it. And then I opened up a construction company, a renovation company, a remodeling company, insurance restoration company. I had that for 17 years. And so that kept me in the real estate business. And all along, I would find a house, I would fix it, I would flip it. And I did this for many, many years until 2012. Somebody invited me to buy a marina with them. And I'd never owned a marina. I'd never bought a marina. I'd never even owned a boat. And so I did but what I had done is I had built several businesses. They had been profitable. They were all self-funded, created them myself. I didn't have any partners. but I knew how to run a business, and I knew how to evaluate a business, and I knew how to market, promote a business, and fill it up. And so I evaluated this property. It was in Charlotte, North Carolina, on Lake Wiley. And I liked what I saw. I liked the opportunity. And so I bought a marina, and it had 115 boat slips. It had 24 RV spots. And eventually what I did was I removed all the RV spots, and I had 38 or 36 tiny homes built on the property. And I became an Airbnb superhost. So we had boat slip rentals, we had the Airbnb business, we had events, we had storage, we had lot storage, we had a boat rental, we had a boat club, event space. We had about a dozen different streams of revenue on the property. And the reason I got into that is because in the flip world, you buy a house, you fix it, you flip it, you sell it, you get one check. And then you start the process over. And even if you run 3 or 4 flips at a time, or even if you run 20 flips at a time, there's that process where there's a finality to the flip. It is eventually sold. Now you can hold them and you can rent them, which is what I did also, but not to the scale of apartments. So I reasoned that in this marina, the case of this marina, there were 115 boat slips. That was 115 checks. There were 38 or 36 tiny homes. That was 36 checks a month. And so, there were events, and there was lot storage, and there was dry storage. And so those were monthly checks. And that's just ongoing revenue. And of course, you have the business around it. You have to wrap it around it. But that made more sense to me to buy a business like that at scale than to do 1 or 2 flips at a time. And of course, in the remodeling and construction business, that's one project at a time. Build a new house, that's one project at a time. Even though you might do multiple of those, it's not the same as buying 100 units in a marina or a storage or an RV park or a mobile home park or an apartment complex. So the scale made a lot of sense to me, and that's what put me on this journey. So since then, I've transacted nearly 2,000 doors, 13 or 14, no, now 15 different projects. Okay. And so we've cycled through several of them, and currently I'm operating about $80 million worth of property under management and continuing to buy more property because it just makes sense. That's everything in the 5-minute nutshell.
And I love that. And, it's interesting that you say that because I've always, thought about, when we first started out, my mother and I, well, what about the fix and flip thing? Like, could that work? But then you realize that you're right. There's a finality to it. And then you're doing it again, and you're doing it again and again and again. But if you do it where, you go to scale, if you have like 2 down units in a 100-unit apartment complex, that's 98 that are still sending you checks. So the scale, you're right, it makes sense. It's like, if one project fails and a single family, the whole thing fails. And it's like, okay, I got to find a new project or something like that. But if you have 2 units that fail in a 100-unit apartment complex, you still have 98 that are giving you checks. So there's a huge hedge there too.
Most apartment complexes operate somewhere around the mid 70% stabilization rate, right? So you break even at let's call it a 72% occupancy. Everything breaks even. You're able to pay your mortgage, 75% occupancy, something like that. So you don't want it, but you can experience 20 in a 100-unit complex example. You can experience 20, 25 people not renting from you and still survive, still get by. Optimally, you'd like to see it in the low 90s to mid 90s continuously all the time, percent occupied. But you do have you do have a built-in safety net there because of the scale.
Yep. Absolutely. So I kind of want to dive into your role with multifamily and everything that you're doing with your projects. Where do you like to specialize? Do you like to bring the capital in? Do you like to build a business? Do you like to find these opportunities? Where do you fit into all this, or at least in the beginning?
Well, in the beginning, this is a great story. In the beginning, I was brought into that project. I had 2 other partners, and I was brought into that project because they needed a sponsor with the business acumen a little bit of cash, and the ability to go live at where to live in the state of the asset. That was a requirement of the lender. And fortunately, at the time, I could. I moved to North Carolina and lived there for several years while I was operating this project. But I was also asked to raise $1.4 million of capital to contribute to the property, to contribute to the process. And I said, okay, great, I can do that. So, I have a long history of business and business contacts and lots of people in my Rolodex. And I thought it very easily I could just make a phone call and collect, $1.4 million. And I was able to raise exactly zero. And so, looking back on it, I now understand why. And that's because I was not known in the space. I was known in these other spaces, in these other businesses. And while I had a good reputation in those other businesses, it did not transfer over to as much as I thought it would to being a multi-unit ownership. Now, I did partner up with two men who had a lot of experience, and they had many assets under their belt. And one of them was able to raise $1.4 million in 9 days. So that got me to thinking, wow, how did all that happen? So, well, I tell you that for two reasons. Number one is I partnered with experienced sponsors, and I used them as the credibility to go back to my database. And I did partner with them a couple of more times after that, and it made every time the process gets easier. And so the other reason I tell you that is because I forgot why, other than good sponsors. Oh, well, they taught me the business. They taught me, okay, you gotta be known in the space. You gotta do your work in the space. You have to promote yourself, market yourself, promote and market your properties and what you're doing. Show returns, have investors, have investor testimonials, those sorts of things. And then the engine revs up, and now the engine is going. So it's like any business. I really, really do believe that I could go start any business I wanted. I would know that I need some time, some marketing, a bit of capital, and I would know that I need someone to mentor me on that business so that I could understand the pitfalls that I was about to face and understand what to do so that I could prevent some of those pitfalls. So it's a real simple formula. It's just like you can do anything. I mean, I couldn't go be a heart surgeon, I guess, but I think you get the point. Any kind of entrepreneurial effort I can tackle because I've tackled many with that formula.
Makes sense too. And, it's funny when people first start, coming out of the gate raising capital, they contact their friends and family and they're like, they know me, so they're going to raise a bunch of money, $0. But you're right. It's because they don't know what you're doing. Because I've said this before on a podcast or a show, I don't remember, but everybody wants to come out of the gate and talk about multifamily, but they don't know what multifamily is and why you're involved in it. Like when I started talking about multifamily to my friends and family, they go, what is that? Yeah. And they just don't know. It's the fear of the unknown. But once you start to market and brand your transition from what you're doing into multifamily and as to why, they're going to go, oh, okay, that makes sense. So it's, branding and marketing seems easy, but you and I both know it's definitely not. It's like another full-time job.
Well, I think also you asked me, what's my area of specialty or what do I focus on, right? And so my focus really is to build the business. Look, when you buy an apartment complex, when you buy a 100-unit apartment complex, when you buy a 200-unit, you are buying someone's business.
Absolutely.
Right? You're buying the doors, and yes, you're buying the dirt, and yes, you're buying the buildings, but you're also buying, their customers. We call them tenants. You're also buying their marketing through their website. You're also buying their great Google reviews. You're also buying their shitty Google reviews. You're buying their personnel. You're buying their marketing team. You're buying their property management. So you are buying a business. All right. You buy their delinquencies.
That you do.
Those kinds of things. So when you buy that business, now it's up to us as the new owner of the business to put my imprint on that business. And so that's where we do the value add strategy. We can change the marketing, we can change the management, we can change the tenant base, we can change anything and everything that we want to about that business that we now own, that is ours, okay, and make it a new business and make it profitable and add the value and the equity to it. So my specialty is buying businesses. So if I count all the apartment complexes that I've purchased, as well as all of the, the business that I've started, I've done $250 million worth of businesses, right? And that's the expertise I have. I can go into a business, I can see what the problems are, I can see what the solutions need to be, and I can put together the team to create and execute those decisions. So in those changes, that's what my expertise is.
That's very important too, because you're right. You are buying a fully fledged business where you're right. You have employees, you have your customers, you have your problems that you're taking on, you got bills to pay, you have systems in place. If from the outside it doesn't look like a business, but on the inside, when you start taking the look at the internal workings, it absolutely is. In fact, sometimes it's a little bit more complex than a business should, but there's the case in point. But I kind of want to dive in a little bit to what you're seeing in the multifamily markets now, because there's so much buzz going around the multifamily industry right now about loans coming due that are maturing. There's distressed properties that are coming to sale. A lot of people are wondering, is syndication, quote unquote, still good? But Paul, with your experience and with your success, what do you see for the rest of this year regarding multifamily? Like, what's your look in the trenches for multifamily for the rest of 2026?
Well, I think if 2026 and 2027, if you can get leads from lenders for properties that are under distress or in distress, and I'll explain that in a second, then that's the ticket. That's the ticket. If you can provide solutions to lenders that have either taken back properties, have properties on a watch list, have properties in loan modification, have properties in pre-foreclosure, if you can work with a lender to take those to solve their problems, that's where the deals are. Because if you think about it, those deals, they are valued much less than what they were purchased for. And so there's a loan balance. Now, will the lender negotiate with you for a reduced loan balance? I don't know. That's up to your negotiation skills, and that's up to how big of a problem they have on a property and how good of a solution you can produce for the lender. But that I believe is where the next year and a half definitely is, that we can buy properties undervalued. And so that's what I'm doing. And I'm also in search for those kinds of properties, in addition to the ones I have, like everybody else. And so if any of your listeners have those kinds of properties and they need help executing how to close those, then I'm your guy to talk to. Okay. So I think that's what I'm not seeing that sellers right now are still offering as much of a discount as we need to see. The ones that are not offering the discount on their properties are because they have fixed interest rate and they're not under as much pressure as those owners and operators who have had variable or floating rate debt. The ones that have variable and floating rate debt and whose loans have come due and or are coming due in the upcoming months, those are the ones that are under a lot of pressure to sell their property. Are they going to have to take a discount if they want to sell their property? Yes. So, and as we go through the rest of 2026 and into 2027, you're going to see this inventory continue to build, which is going to put more pressure on the market and on lenders. And so people like myself can go in and take some of that pressure off and buy some of those properties at discounted rates. All that to say, you still have to underwrite the property. You still have to evaluate it correctly. You still have to have a bona fide business plan, because that property's in trouble. All right. Maybe the biggest reason it's in trouble is because of the floating debt that was on the floating rate debt that was on that property. But that also created a whole bunch of other problems. Low occupancy, not putting CapEx money into the property, deferred maintenance usually suffered. So the properties are not in great condition or not in as good a condition as they could be. It's because an operator took all of their money that they had, either from investors or CapEx or however they got the money, and they moved it over to making a mortgage payment. So the property, many properties suffered. And so the opportunity is not just to buy a property at a discount, but it's to get back in there and infuse a bunch of capital into it to make it a smooth running operational, viable business that you just bought.
Absolutely. And I've been seeing the same thing too with, distressed properties. And sometimes the property isn't even distressed itself. It's actually the loan that's distressed. And that's, the kind of thing that I've been seeing too. But I guess, there's a little thing that you mentioned there. Paul, if someone were to find a distressed property or distressed deal and they want to reach out to you or just reach out to you in general, what's the best way that they can reach out and contact you?
MontelongoCapital.com.
Awesome.
So there, my website, I've got all my social media links and calendars and ways to contact me. It's got everything. MontelongoCapital.com. I'm very easy to find. Very easy to find. Very easy to find on social media. So.
Yep.
But MontelongoCapital.com is direct link right there. Yeah.
Awesome. And Paul, I guess to wrap up the episode, any closing thoughts or remarks for anyone that wants to or is looking to get into multifamily this year or sometime soon?
The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time to plant a tree is today. So that's kind of cliche. I get it. But
but it makes sense.
The biggest successes I've had in my career, and by the way, I don't want to just sit here and tell your audience that I've had nothing but successes, because I've had a lot of failures as well, right? That's an episode that's 4 times longer than this one.
We might just have to make a part 2 then.
3, 4, 5, and 6, right? But I don't think anybody does anything significant in their life without having a lot of failures, okay, or learning experiences. But seriously, if anybody has a vision, a dream, and just start. You don't have to know everything about everything in the business. Start, jump in the pool, learn how to swim, hang around people that are doing it and doing it well. Find somebody that can guide you and direct you. I was extremely fortunate to have 2 very mature, solid, experienced mentors. And I still talk to one of them almost 3-4 times a week sometimes, so, and the other one, I can call him anytime and he'll call me right back. So that was a good relationship. But I do think that it's important to have guidance, and direction, and just don't lollygag around. Get after it. Put in the work.
Absolutely. I love that. Beautifully said. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to learn more about Paul and his mission and what he's working on, go to MontelongoCapital.com. You'll see that in the description below. And also you can check out the social media links that will be attached there as well, along with the episode link as well. On social media, you can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and all the various social media platforms. But please stay tuned for more, and please go connect with Paul. And to my audience out there, build yourself better and bigger every day. Live better, live bigger. Always moving forward. Paul, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. I know my audience got a lot of insight because I know I did. And thank you for sharing, my friend. It's been an honor.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.